Today we've got Jules Lipman on the line to talk tagging taxonomies. Jules is a product designer at SafetyCulture, and we're going to be drilling down with a couple of questions relating to tagging and taxonomies. Welcome, Jules. Can you kick us off by talking through your role at SafetyCulture?
I work across two teams at the moment. So one is sensors, mainly focused on hardware, and the other one is a customer-facing analytics product. SafetyCulture is a tech unicorn, and our mission is to help companies achieve safer and higher quality workplaces through innovative, low-cost mobile-first products. So that's our key focus, is just how can we make people's lives and jobs safer and better every day.
And how do the product teams at SafetyCulture both work and collaborate?
The designers are embedded into a feature team. So within that feature team, we have a product manager, an engineering manager, and a designer. We're the trio that really makes a lot of the core decisions about the product. And then, of course, the team is heavily engaged. So we have, 5 to 8 engineers, and within those engineers, we have front end and back end, and possibly mobile engineers, depending what product feature you're working on. And everyone's highly engaged in the process throughout, in terms of all the way from pre-research and direction for the team and what we're trying to achieve with it, through the research itself, being heavily engaged in understanding what those customer problems are, to advising on tech issues, to we often, because obviously customers don't see the product as broken into the features, the teams that we have, there's a lot of cross collaboration with other teams to say, can we integrate to get data from your piece to enhance our piece, or how can we display something in a better way to the customer so it is that uniform, united experience that we're all aiming for? And what are the cross dependencies? Is there something that we want to do that we can't do yet because another team's currently working on it, and we need the output of that to input into what we want to do? So it's a heavily collaborative environment, and at the core of it is a really engaged engineering team and a really strong product direction.
Let's jump into some tagging and taxonomies related questions. To start, we'd love to know how you tag your data and how that fits into your taxonomy.
It's definitely helpful to just do the research, upload those videos, get the transcript, and as I'm going through the transcript, I'll just start tagging things, and I'll use a really long name at first. It's really, for me, about affinity mapping and trying to find the best way to bring those different thoughts together and see what the united threads are. So for me, I'll start out with something like, I'll highlight a sentence and say, customers are contacting a lot of other people in the course of them completing this task. And it might be something actually that long. And then what will happen is, as I go through other interviews and I start seeing that more frequently, I might be able to summarize that into a better statement about collaboration. And then I'll go back and change my tag later, but all of that information's together. Or I might have a number of these different extended tag names about different aspects I've noticed. And then I'll go back to my taxonomy and see what can be merged together as well, to say, oh, okay, actually, I think I was looking at the same thing, maybe from two, like the positive and the negative perspective, but in this case, I'm happy to lump them into one and say they were looking at this aspect of the task, and that's enough for me at that time. So I'd say the way I operate is that you can definitely start out with certain, I find it's helpful to have the groupings or those columns within Dovetail of, I know I want to look for something about metrics. I know I want to look for something about collaboration. I know I want to look for something about alerts. And then after that, kind of how those tags themselves get generated comes through different projects, and I'll add new tags as I need them. Just whatever helps me better understand that information, helps the team better understand what the core themes were from that research in a way that's presentable to others.
Can you tell me about how you build out your existing taxonomy?
The project is an independent piece of research that was conducted. So it's not about the topic and tying all the research for the same topic together, because the topic is essentially the feature. So we have a folder for that, but all the projects within that folder are independent pieces of research. So there was a piece of research where we did one-on-one interviews, and then there was a piece of research where we did user testing, and then there was a piece of research where we did a card sort exercise. And all of those for us will separate up because it's important that when someone looks back at that research, they can understand why it was conducted and what the outcomes were meant to be. And so we find that kind of title page or cover page within a Dovetail project is essential for us to write a summary of what the research was about, maybe include the recruitment email that we sent, maybe include a comment about the customers that we contacted, and that helps somebody else also coming back in the future. If anybody shuffles teams or when you have new people in, they can understand what was the list of questions that was being asked and why, and have better context for why the research was conducted and what we got out of it. So because of that, it means that the theme around the research is the same in terms of you're still trying to find out more about a particular feature, and the aspects of that feature often aren't changing. In terms of if it's a collaborative piece of our platform, there will still be information you need to know about how it is collaborative or not and how that's working for customers. So rather than us recreating tags every time we have, a usability study, which is an extension on or a later piece in the process after the discovery research, it makes sense for us that we're using extension tag boards and just adding and amending those tag boards as we need them, because it's a consistent flow and about gaining and developing that understanding across multiple pieces of research, as opposed to like an independent thing that you only do once that you won't come back to. So in general, there might be something that was very specific to that. So for example, I'll add a tag in a usability study that says, pass or fail or struggles, but I might not need that on, that's not as relevant to my one-on-one research, so I won't add it onto my extension tag board. But in general, the extension tag board is what we use all the time.
Tell us how extension tag boards can give you a holistic view of your data.
We get a lot of go-to-market feedback. So from our frontline teams like support and account executives. And so they're giving us information about features as well. And so we have a separate project where all that information goes. And because we've enabled our same extension tag in that project, it means that I can now put together the go-to-market feedback and survey feedback and usability testing feedback and the one-on-one generative study that we did, and get this really full picture across, because I've had those consistent tags, and I can go back to a certain tag like temperature, for example, from hardware, and say, well, this is all the information that we know about temperature, and I'm not being blindsided, or I'm not having blind spots because there are certain aspects where, I didn't take into account the go-to-market feedback, or I didn't take into account the survey feedback. But because it's a consistent tag, it ensures that I'm analysing all that information collectively when making an opinion or decision or informing a design about temperature.
And what are your thoughts on tagging the same data with multiple tags?
I think it's naive to think that there's a black and white around what somebody says. I mean, people are complex, and even within a sentence can touch on a variety of themes. So I can highlight the same thing and say, again, it's a reference to a temperature use case, or it's a reference to a wind use case, but they said it within the same block of text, so I'll highlight both of those. Equally, we could be looking at things like, the placement of that, or something about alerts. So they might be talking about temperature and how quickly they got alerted about a temperature change. And so I'd tag both of those. So for me, I think there are no concerns in terms of using multiple tags on the same thing. There's a lot of ways to cut and slice your qualitative information, and it's important that you have the flexibility in your system to do that. So when I'm looking specifically at metrics and I want to get a number, or an understanding of which one of these metrics is the most important to our customer, I can do that. And equally, I can look at which is a struggle around alerting and where metrics don't matter, and have a tag that helps me analyze that. So I think multiple tagging is really important to help you understand those facets without, Otherwise, I guess I'd have to sit there and say, well, I want to tag it about alerts because it says alerts, and I want to tag it about temperature, but now I have to pick one. So then if I ever go back to try and look at the other thing, I can't find it because I didn't tag it that way. So for us, definitely multiple tagging is just, you're looking at it from different frames of reference. And then for you in the future, you can always go back and check that frame of reference and have that inform your design later.
And how do you and your team use fields?
Fields are exclusively around searchable content related to the customer that was interviewed. So it's like name, email address, time zone, customer number, maybe their account executive if that was relevant, the date and time of the interview just as a reference point. But aside from that, we don't really put much in the fields. In the future, I think it would be great for us to be tagging it with maybe a certain stage in the life cycle of the customer that was relevant to us. But at the moment, for example, because that project was a project within the sensors folder, I don't feel the need to tag it with sensors because that's the only place that that information would be, is in the sensors folder. So it's kind of like unnecessary to add an extra field around that. So for us, it's just searchable content. And so that, again, because we're getting information from go-to-market teams that reference certain customers, and we are also conducting one-on-one research or usability studies with those customers, it's important for us to be able to search, dovetail, and find all the information coming together from those customers. And that's really what fields are for us.
And the final question, what's your advice for people who are about to create a tagging taxonomy?
The best way to start is just upload your research and then start with your essentially digital affinity mapping. If you come in too structured, what you're trying to say is that I know what we were going to learn from this, and that's the opposite of what happens in research. So I tend to think you don't need something especially structured. The value of research is trying to establish what was learnt from it and then how you can apply what was learnt. So while you're learning, just generatively, create those tags for the things you find of interest and that the team finds of interest, and start looking for the overlaps and start seeing who's saying that the most. And for me, you can do that within the study and by changing tags and updating them constantly, and it doesn't have to be something particularly structured or something that you need to write out beforehand. I just start tagging when I drop my first interview in, and then as I go through the rest of the study, it's the same thing, or even with the usability test, the same thing. So for me, the value in research is that we don't know what we're going to find. So I think it's counterintuitive to say I can have a set of established tags because that says I know what I'm going to find, and that's not true. So I think just don't overthink it, don't stress about it, don't expect to have all the perfect names up front, even if you do want to start like that, and just be open to what you're learning in the research study and see what groupings naturally come about, and then that will give you the best idea of how to progress your research and also how to progress the design and have the best outcome for the customer.
Sound advice, Jules. Tune in next time when we get another guest on the line to talk tagging taxonomies.